Native ways of learning. 3 traditional pedagogical strategies, which can be incorporated into a modern school curriculum. Historically, the indigenous people groups of Alaska had ways of passing knowledge to the next generation which were unique and effective for their purposes. After contact, first with Russia and then with the United States of America, Alaska natives were exposed to different types of educational methods. These new methods, though, seemed at times to produce deleterious results to the retention of Native Alaskan cultural heritage. These educational methods also did not seem to be effective for the primary purpose, as Alaska Natives have consistently scored lower than non-Native children in Alaska. Perhaps teaching methods which incorporate Alaska Native traditional ways of learning and knowing could prove more effective. One tradition which could be useful for educators is story knifing. Story knifing is a recreational activity done by girls, usually around 4 years old to young teenagers. And it's done primarily among the Yupik people of the Yukon and Kuskokwim River areas. The game would utilize mud either outside on the ground or spread on some wood for use indoors. A carving implement, such as a whalebone or a knife, was also necessary. In order to play, the girls would first find a good spot. It would ideally be free from brush or debris and would have mud of just the right consistency. The girls would then sit in a circle. It was possible to play with as few as 2 girls, but usually it was a small group. The one who was telling the story would first prepare the mud by smoothing it with a knife. She would then draw an outline of the opening scene. This was usually a house. Key furnishings would be important for the story. They would also be drawn. After the setting for the opening scene was completed, the narrator would begin telling the story. It would usually begin with a sentence about the principal characters. Unlike objects of the scene, each character would be drawn as they appear in the story. Special characters, known well by the players, would be used to denote characters in the story would be given proper names, unless it was a real person that was known by the narrator. Whenever a character would speak, a V-shape or tiny lines would be added above their head and continue the whole time they were speaking. When there was a new scene, the mud would be wiped clean, and the basic house and characters would be redrawn without the detail of all the furnishings. If the scene had changed, however, then it would be drawn with all of the details. At the end of the story, the last scene would be erased, normally accompanied by the narrator saying, "The end." Story knifing could be an effective tool for teachers of Alaska Native children. As just one example of how it could be used, teachers could assign students to each learn a different true story from a particular historical period. The students could share what they learned with story knifing, either in small groups or to the whole class. There are 3 characteristics in particular which would make story knifing conducive for learning. The first is that it is fun. Although story knifing isn't played as much as it used to be, it is remembered with much fondness by elders who used to play. The girls who do still play it also find it to be very enjoyable. Fun activities with a strong educational focus have been shown to be very effective. You see, the brain stores memories more strongly if they are linked to enjoyable experiences. Second, stories themselves are powerful mnemonic devices. The brain seems to be naturally and particularly wired to respond to stories, as information from a story is more readily remembered than facts given in isolation. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, participating in story knifing would help students to connect with and take pride in their heritage. The second traditional technique we're going to consider is math in a cultural context. MCC is a movement which aims to use local traditional culture and language in order to teach mathematics to native children. For example, one project involves exploring geometrical proofs and concepts while building a fish rack. Another MCC example is having students work with traditional Yupik numbers as well as using the traditional Yupik base 20 number system. Story knifing, described previously, has also been used to help students learn geometry concepts. Connecting new knowledge to a network of previously learned knowledge has been shown to be effective. As well as using a cognitive schema, connecting new information to a familiar social construct or to previously physical experiences has also yielded positive results. Based upon this research, it seems reasonable to conclude that teaching new mathematical concepts using familiar objects, tools, words, and cultural references could prove more effective and efficient than using Western-style word problems from a textbook, especially considering that traditionally, Yupik elders and parents taught their young experientially with hands-on activities or by having them observe. The third technique we will be discussing is camps. Camps could potentially be used to both give children in a community the opportunity to learn from village elders, as well as to borrow components of camp to enrich the school classroom experience. Alaska Natives traditionally have spent much of their time each year in camps, away from their home. Camps were where they would hunt, fish, and forage in order to get food and clothes they needed for the year. There were sometimes winter, summer, and autumn camps in some communities. One of the benefits of camp life was that young people and adults could work together. In this way, children could learn important knowledge and skills from elders. In the camps, lessons were often taught by example more than by words. Young people were expected to be attentive and to learn by observation. Days were long and busy, but were often unstructured. This left room for flexibility because so much of what they did depended on weather conditions. There are many Alaska Native families who still go to fishing and hunting camps, however, not as many as in the past. Also, the families who still go often do not go as frequently. One of the reasons may be the school system. There is now much time devoted to formal Western education. Only summer camps are now possible for the whole family, unless the family wants their child to miss substantial time in school. In many communities, summer camps are even becoming more rare, perhaps due to the ease at which modern foods are available now in local stores. In 2000, the Calista Elders Council, a council representing the elders in Yupik communities, decided to take matters into their own hands in regards to the deculturalization they saw happening to their youth. They formed a summer culture camp, in which young people could come to work alongside and learn from elders. During the day, they participated in such activities as making fish nets or canoes, as well as catching and drying fish. Each evening, the elders also spoke as the children were seated around them in a circle. The value of such a camp is immense. There are things which cannot be taught by those who come from outside the community. Things such as local community values and subsistence skills which have been passed down for hundreds of years from one generation to the next must come from parents and elders. In light of this, it is worth considering whether Alaskan school districts should allocate time during the school year in which local families can travel to autumn and winter camps. Alaskan Native communities are in the unique situation of needing to learn the new ways offered by Western education, while at the same time needing and desiring to retain the old ways as well. Is it possible for schools to assist the communities in this balancing act? Potential criticisms of this idea could include the argument that this would cause Alaska Native children to get even further behind in regards to their Western-style schooling. This would certainly be an obstacle. However, the importance of retaining the knowledge and customs of each community may be worth the effort. It may also be possible to incorporate some aspects of Native camps in order to enrich the classroom experience. As one example, classroom learning could be more observational wherever it is appropriate. In Native camps, as we said earlier, teaching was done much less by words than by example. Children would watch as a canoe was being built or a net woven, and they would try to emulate what they saw. Teachers could also try this approach. For example, in teaching a science lesson on entomology, the teacher and a teaching assistant could take the children outside. While the children observed silently, the two adults could find various insects and describe them to each other as far as what they see and the observations they make about the insects. The adults could record their observations and descriptions of the insects into a notebook while the children watched silently. With a few words, the teachers could then direct the students to pair up and to copy the teacher's example by finding their own insects and working together as a pair to talk about and write down their observations. In this type of lesson, the Native children would use the traditional and hopefully familiar skill of learning by paying quiet attention, and they would also learn to transfer their observational skills to the more modern skill of scientific inquiry. In conclusion, most Alaska Native communities have been successfully educating their children for hundreds of years. With the advent of Western culture-style school systems, though, the performance of Native children on average is lagging behind that of Alaskan non-natives. Perhaps a reason for this is that the Western school systems use teaching and learning strategies which either do not fit well with the way Native children learn, or they may create an environment which is unfamiliar and thus uncomfortable for the children. In this project, we analyzed 3 strategies in regards to incorporating indigenous traditions into the modern school curriculum. They were 1. Using story knifing to help children retell what they have learned. 2. Using math in a cultural context to have children practice mathematics in a hands-on way and with materials and numbers with which they are familiar. And lastly, 3. Borrowing observational learning from culture camps. It may be that more incorporation of these familiar traditions into school life can help improve the academic performance of Alaska Native students. At the very least, doing so would help to demonstrate value for the traditional culture of the children's community.